welcome to lesson 14.1. And when our second video is going to be 14.2, we're doing the first two lessons of Unit 14. I'm combining them. And so our first video of tonight will be 14.1, which deals with finding the square roots. And we're also going to evaluate expressions involving square roots. So we're going to put two lessons together in one tonight. Each video will be one lesson, so we cannot waste time. Let's get busy. Our essential question for this first video: how do you find the length of a square given its area? All right, so ladies and gentlemen, a lot of things you need to know about square roots. You took some notes, hopefully from the top of page 628, and you recognize that, hey, first of all, it said right in there that every single positive number has a positive and a negative square root. You know that square roots are numbers that when multiplied by itself equals a given number, all right? And then you recognize perfect squares. Well, perfect squares are squares that have integers. I'm sorry. Perfect squares are numbers that have integers as their answer, all right? So, ladies and gentlemen, you need to also know the different types of symbols. We have the radical sign. Inside the radical sign, the number that goes inside that radical sign, well, that's called a radicand. All right, that's pretty straightforward. And you have to recognize this radical sign, that radical sign means that we want the square root of a number. Just the sign, plain and simple, just like that, means we want the square root of whatever number is on the inside. Now, if there is no symbol on the outside, like right here in the first example of their square root chart, that means you want the positive answer of that number. If there's a negative sign out in front, that means you want the negative square root of that number. And then, of course, if there's the positive and negative, then you want both the positive and negative answer. Now, if they just give you a number, for example, if they just give you 16 and say, hey, what's the square root of that? If they just give you the number without the radical sign, okay, and they say, hey, what is the square root of 16? Well, that would always be positive or negative, because we just said a few moments ago, every single positive number, 16 is a positive number, has two square roots. One is positive, one is negative. So if they don't specifically ask in the form of a radical sign with nothing in front of it for positive or negative in front of it for negative or both positive negative signs, then the answer will be both. Got it? All right, so let's just do a few examples and we're going to be done with this first video. Find the square roots of perfect squares. And this first example, example 1, we are finding the two square roots of this number. And so we would say, hey, well, I know that when I multiply 8 times 8, I would get 64. So then the answer, positive or negative, 4, 2, 8. You could also write your answer as 8 and negative 8 if you wanted to write it either way. If you want to write the 8 twice, or if you want to put this symbol, positive, negative, in front of it. Now they're telling us they want the negative square root of 81. And I know that 81, the square root of 81 is 9, because 9 times 9 is 81. So my answer would be negative 9 because I have the negative sign in front. Now I have the positive negative in front of the radical sign. So I know I'm going to have two answers, a positive answer and a negative answer. And now I have a fraction. Well, it just so happens you do those just like you do any regular number. So we have the square root of 9, which is 3, over the square root of 64, which is 8. So our answer is positive or negative 3/8, or you could write 3/8 and negative 3/8. Remember, both of those mean the same thing. Here we have the square root of 12.25. And so I guess this is a good point for me to tell you, you should memorize your perfect squares. And in other words, 1 squared is 1, and then the square root of 1 is 1. And then you have 2 squared is 4. The square root of 4 is 2. And you should do that all the way through 12 squared being 144. And then the square root of 144 equals 12. You should have all those memorized. All right. So if you have all those memorized, then you're looking at this number and you said, hey, the square root of 12.25. Well, you recognize that has to be somewhere between the square root of 9, which is 3, and the square root of 16, which is 4. So the answer, because 12.25 falls between 9 and 16, that number has to be 3 point something. Well, you're going to use your calculator and you're going to punch it in. You're going to find out that it is actually 3.5. All right? And our last example with finding the square roots, we have the negative square root of 4/25, which of course would give us negative. The square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 25 is 5. So we would have negative 2/5. All righty. Now we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to evaluate some expressions involving square roots. And so that just means following the order of operations. So here we have 2 times. Remember, there's no operational symbol in there. It's right next to the radical sign. That radical sign is a grouping symbol that tells us in our GEMDAs, if you remember, we changed from PEMDAs to GEMDAs. That grouping symbol means we do everything inside the grouping symbol first. And that says we got to find the square root of 144. And then if you put some number next to that grouping symbol, it is automatically multiplication. If it wants to be something else, it will tell you addition, subtraction, or division. All right. So now we know the square root of 144, that happens to be 12. So now we're going 2 times 12, and that is 24. We're not going to do a ton of these examples because it's just order of operations, but now we're going to have a square root somewhere in there. So looking at what we have over here, we do have the radical sign with parentheses around it. That's telling us we're going to square this square root of 49. So we have 49 minus, well, what's the square root of 49? That's right, it is 7, and 7 is now going to be squared. So that's 49 minus 49, and that is equal to 0. So a couple basic examples, not a whole lot. Let's do some real-life examples. And both of them are going to be fairly similar today. What is the radius of the circle? And that circle having an area of 50.24 inches squared. Okay? And so you know that the area of a circle is pi times the radius squared. Excuse me. And so you just plug in the numbers. 50.24 is equal to pi times the radius squared. We're going to divide by pi. And we would get, well, 50 divided by 2.4, that's going to give us, what is that going to give us? That's going to give us 16. So 16 is equal to r squared. And we know that the inverse operation of squaring is to take the square root. Then the square root of r squared will give us r, and the square root of 16 will give us 4. So we know our answer is the radius of this is 4 inches. All right? Our next example, it says the area of a circle is 2,826 square feet. Write and solve an equation to find the diameter. Well, once again, we know that area is equal to pi times the radius squared. We're going to shove in 2,826. That equals pi times the radius squared. We're doing the exact same thing we just did one moment ago. So when we divide 2,826 by pi, we get that 900 is equal to the radius squared. And then, of course, we're going to take the square root of both numbers, and we would find that r is equal to 30. Well, that's not the answer. He says it wants the diameter, and we were given the radius. So that means that the diameter is equal to 2 times the radius. So now we have 2 times 30, and so our diameter is equal to 60 feet in this particular case. All right? Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end. It's a lot of quick writes. You're going to have to pause it to do all these numbers. You have 5 actual questions. I know it's only numbered to 4. This one right here would be number 5, even though it says C, because it talks about the area of a square. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to pause, write those down. When you're done, take a quick break. Come back and join us for video number 2, which will be cube roots from lesson 14.2. Thank you.